Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by these great sponsors. Axon started out of a passion for keeping agriculture moving. Imagine having 100 years of tire and wheel knowledge in your back pocket the next time you sell a piece of ag equipment. To find more or become an Axon dealer, please visit axontire.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Valley Transportation. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 or go to valleytransinc.com for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. This podcast is also brought to you by AgDirect. No matter how you buy your ag equipment, from a dealer, auction, or a private party, AgDirect can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here, moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast number 258. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by AgDirect. So, cool thing about working with the guys at AgDirect is that you get to talk to the cool people over at CoBank. So it's really an honor to have the guys that like Tanner come on, Tanner Ehmke. You know, he's been on here a lot, but Tanner is he works for CoBank. And explain a little bit what CoBank does, Tanner.
Yeah, Casey. So CoBank is a part of the Farm Credit System. We're a wholesale lender to the Farm Credit Associations in the western half of the country, also up in the Northeast. And then we're also the bank for co-ops, or was our original designation, but that's expanded a little bit now over the years, or quite a bit. But we cover all aspects of agriculture. We're the largest lender in agriculture in the U.S.
Right on. And Tanner, you have how many people are in your group that focus on the various commodities that are associated with agriculture?
We cover all the major commodities. We have Ken Zuckerberg. He covers grain and farm supply. We have Brian Ernest. He covers animal protein. I cover dairy and specialty crops. We also have other economists focusing on infrastructure in the U.S. Jeff Johnson focuses on broadband, and Terry Vishwanath focuses on power, water, and energy. So we're a diverse group. We're a tight group. We like to say that we punch above our weight. Just a handful of us. We're able to do a lot of work for as much as we bank in the U.S.
Right on. So Tanner, your group you're basically saddled with the economics and trend forecasting, those kind of things. You and your group for CoBank, correct?
Yeah, we're looking at the opportunities and risks that are facing our customers, and by extension, what we're facing as a bank. As a bank, we're concerned about credit risk and the health and well-being of our customers, and so we try to put forth views and opinions based on what we're seeing in the marketplace and trends in the industry that will be impactful to our customer base. Yep. And when you have things like Ukraine going on, it affects all of us. Yep. All of our sectors have been impacted.
Yep. Well, good thing for you guys. There's not much going on in the world right now, so I'm sure you're just back hanging out, not doing much right now.
Yeah, we just have so much free time these days.
Yeah, a lot of free time on your hands. So you brought the point that I want to hit on today is Ukraine. So we are 40 days-ish into the Ukraine Russia situation, and it's escalated more than it hasn't, right? I mean, Russia's talked about pulling back troops, this, that, and other things. I don't know if they really pulled anyone back as much as they just repositioned what they had going on. A lot of arms from around the world are coming into Ukraine so they can support Ukrainians as they fight the Russians. But the biggest thing that's weighing on people right now, and especially you see the reaction in the grain markets as you see what's going on across the commodity boards, there's a big fear that nothing is going to get planted in Ukraine on time. And I've read estimates of 25% is kind of the number, but I have a hard time believing that, just because I can't believe if you didn't have seed to start with going into the war, you probably don't have seed now. Diesel fuel's in short supply because they're using it for the war machine. And moreover, like you hit on before we start talking, is that people are putting down their tools on the farm and picking up arms and going to fight the Russians. So there's a labor issue that you see there. So I guess as you are seeing all this unfold and take place, what are your thoughts about the overall kind of picture that we see moving into spring planning for Ukraine?
Well, on the whole, it's hard to create a bearish situation or a bearish view out of this situation for any commodities, because there's going to be a ripple effect on feed, for instance, and how that impacts livestock and dairy. And there's, in my sector, especially crops, that's been disrupted with exports into the Black Sea being impacted, and all those fresh fruits and vegetables having to find another home. Mm-hmm. But specifically to the commodity in question here of greatest importance is wheat. Wheat out of the Black Sea region feeds a lot of people around the world, especially in the Middle East, in North Africa. And those are politically unstable areas, as we've seen over how many years ago was it? We saw the Arab Spring, and that was the Arab Spring was preceded by a drought in Russia and an abysmal crop, and then bread prices went record high. So as things are right now with Russia, there was some hope that perhaps with Russia retreating from Kyiv, and now there was their flagship Navy vessel in the Black Sea has been sunk. There was some thinking here that perhaps this may be a turning point, that trade might start to flow again. That would be the optimistic view, I would say. And this is going to elevate the uncertainty, I think, for all commodities, because it doesn't appear that the Russians are packing up and going home. Rather, they're regrouping, and they're going to focus on the Donbass area in eastern Ukraine. And they're digging in, and they've appointed a general that had a fairly brutish history in handling Syria. So the Russians mean business. They're putting a guy in charge who's going to do whatever it takes to win, however ethical or unethical it may be, using chemical weapons, cluster bombs, what have you. All of these are signals that this is a long haul. And if that's the case, if the Russians are preparing for a long-term battle in eastern Ukraine, then what that means for the global commodity trade is that there is no bearish situation here to be had. There is a lot of uncertainty. You don't know how far it can escalate, or how quickly, or how far the Russians will go to beat the Ukrainians into submission, or to use that leverage of high food prices and high wheat prices to try to leverage other countries to side with them, and to try to persuade NATO in the Western world to end or to allow Russia to have what they want at the bargaining table. Mm-hmm. They're going to use food as a weapon. They have used it as a weapon in the past. They will use it again this time around. And so, to your point, what you were saying, you were bringing up there earlier, Casey, about the planting of the spring wheat crop, and other row crops like corn and sunflowers. There's obviously a huge question mark on that. What resources do they have to even make that happen? Certainly, there will be some farmers who have stayed on the farm. They still have their machinery in working order. They still have fuel. They still have seed. They still have fertilizer. How many farmers actually fit into that category who have everything they need?
Exactly.
I mean, you know what it's like to plant a crop.
Yeah.
And it's not even in normal situations, when you have all the weather working with you, or when the weather is being cooperative and Mother Nature is not throwing any curveballs at you, it's still a stressful and difficult process. Mm-hmm. Now you add in all these uncertainties of fuel availability, irrespective of cost. We're just talking about fuel availability, fertilizer availability. The Russian army has also planted landmines in fields, mm-hmm. And booby-trapped farms and houses, and all that stuff as they left Western Ukraine. So they've done everything they can to sabotage food production in Ukraine. If they can't bomb them out, they're going to try to starve them out. And what that's going to do is have a ripple effect in global trade for the foreseeable future. It absolutely is going to have a ripple effect through 2022, definitely into 2023. Now, if the Russians are digging in, let's take the longer view here. What's going to happen this fall when it comes time to planting the winter wheat crop? Well, assuming that we're still going to have these problems hanging around, we don't know to what degree. We don't know if NATO or the European Union is going to be able to send fuel, for instance, into Ukraine to help these farmers, for instance, or send machinery or what have you. We don't know what situation that will look like this fall, but we're going to assume it's not going to be ideal if the Russians are digging in. So what that means then is we may have some problems planting the fall crop as well in Ukraine, and perhaps even in Russia. Same thing there. If fuel is being diverted to military use rather than farm use, or if the farm labor is being drafted into the Russian army. I believe like 25% of the Russian army is conscripts. Mm-hmm. So they're going after the general population, drafting the general population into the army. Well, we're going to assume that's going to be a squeeze on the Russian farmer as well. Okay, so it's not just the Ukrainians getting squeezed here, it's the Russian farmer too. And that's going to be impacting perhaps planting conditions, weather and otherwise, this fall across the entire Black Sea region. So you add all this up with all of these uncertainties, and there's just no bearish situation here that we can come up with. It is, how bullish is it? How much of the crop will be planted? And if so, with what kind of inputs? If they don't have chemical, if they don't have fertilizer, that's absolutely going to be impacting field conditions and crop fertility and ultimately yield. Mm-hmm. So assuming we have reduced acreage across all crops, including wheat, and reduced yields on the fall planted crop, now we're talking about a smaller crop going into 2023's harvest, which is going to tighten the balance sheet into 2024. Now we're talking about multiple crop cycles here of a tight balance sheet out of a key exporting area. Now, all kinds of things can happen around the planet outside of the Black Sea region with high with high grain prices and oilseed prices and high food prices around the world. Theoretically, that's going to spur some acres to be planted someplace else of all crops. Right. Now, there's always that fertility issue, though. I know that with our customers, you hear these anecdotes that our farmers have the fertilizer of the spring. A lot of farmers booked their fertilizer last fall, so the high prices this spring that we're seeing are really going to be a problem, more so for this fall. Okay, so now we're talking about fertilizer availability in the United States and around the world for the back half of this year. That could be interesting. And now we're talking about the South Americans planting their crop. We're talking about Asia planting their crop. We're getting into all kinds of other knock-on effects here around the world just because of the fertilizer situation. Yeah. And as it's been talked about in the news a lot since February 24th, a huge amount of our fertilizer in P&K comes out of the Black Sea region, specifically Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. So as long as that continues to be disrupted with the Russians digging in, we have to assume we're going to be in a tight fertilizer situation, and that's going to be impacting all crops around the world, at least for the year forthcoming, which can have impacts on yield going out into 2023 and 2024. So we'll see what happens with Russia and their new approach here to focusing on the East. eastern part of Ukraine, and what transpires from that. Hopefully, we'll see some trade open up in that part of the world with some. If the Russians pull back with their navy, and that may be a positive for the Ukrainians, and get some wheat and grain and flowing, and fertilizer flowing too, perhaps. But that would be the optimistic view.
Okay. All right. So now lay that all out there, and we're looking at wheat prices now that are, I haven't seen my alert here yet today, but I mean, you're looking at, I've seen $12 wheat. I've seen some big numbers out there. From an economist perspective, at what point does wheat get so high that buyers are saying, like, we just can't afford to buy this anymore? We can't in turn go around and sell, $15 loaves of bread to make this work.
Well, there's going to be that substitution effect that end users and consumers are going to be doing. If they can't afford bread, they're going to go to something else. Mm-hmm. And you've got some other commodities out there like rice, right, which is in greater abundance. And so that's kind of the pressure release valve for food. So if wheat is going to be in this situation of being tight out for the next couple of years, I would imagine we're going to continue to see a shift over to rice. Now, some cultures are not rice eating cultures, but who knows when bread prices are unaffordable. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they would be willing to entertain another source of calories. So that being said, we're starting to see those early signs of substitution right now. Rice prices are climbing, although not to the degree of what we've seen in wheat, obviously. So I think going forward that we're gonna continue to see more and more focus on alternative calories. If you can't get wheat, then rice is going to be there as an alternative. At least for this year. India has been exporting a lot of wheat and rice, and that has been allowing the world flow of grain or food grains. Those are your two big ones, wheat and rice together. But at some point, even India will reach a breaking point where their government says, okay, we have to stop the flow of grain here. And they have huge amounts or huge stocks of both wheat and rice. And I think that's the focus here, what happens in India. And they're going to keep moving grain until their politicians get a little worried, and at which point they will probably impose export embargoes on wheat and rice. At that point, things could get quite interesting with global food prices. They're high already. If a country like India were to impose restrictions on exports, prices are going to get pretty high pretty quick.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about all this happening now. And you're going to throw, the Fed has made it pretty clear that they're going to be pretty aggressive to fight this inflation situation that we see in front of us. Interest rates have come up. Last I read an article the other day, I think it was yesterday, home lending, 30-year home lending, interest rates have hit 5% for the first time since 2011. So I guess as you take a look at the interest situation that we see out there and the inflation situation, how are you, I guess, monitoring that situation compared with everything else we got going on?
Well, central to the inflation story is food and energy. Mm-hmm. And those are volatile. And the Fed typically does not look at those. They will follow it, but what they want to look at is core inflation, which is all the other product goods and services out there minus food and energy. And with inflation now at 8.5%, there's talk of the Fed raising interest rates the next meeting by 50 basis points instead of 25, and then perhaps following up again in the following meeting with a 50 basis point increase. And that's all in an effort here to tame inflation across the board. But the problem here, though, with food inflation is so much of that, and energy inflation too, so much of that is outside of the Federal Reserve's jurisdiction, we'll say. How much influence can they have on food prices when you have these trade logistics issues, especially out of the Black Sea region, But at the same time, we can't forget that we still have a drought in this country.
Right.
And it's a terrible drought across over half of the entire country. The entire western half of the U.S. is still in drought. And the Federal Reserve has no influence with interest rate policy on changing the drought. I
wish they could.
Yeah, I bet you they wish they could.
Yeah.
And I wish they could too. But that's just outside of their realm of influence.
Right.
And right now, the indications are that La Nina, this is a La Nina year, which is dry in the western half of the U.S. typically, is that it's going to persist through this summer. That's bad news. It's really bad news, especially for the wheat crop in Kansas, in the Dakota, all the way up into the Dakotas, looking west, even up into Canada. And so now you already have a tight wheat situation globally. You have an even tighter situation now because of the drought. But it's not just wheat. It's everything else as well. USDA was forecasting in their prospective plannings report that corn acres are going to be way down. Hay acres are going to be way down. Bad news for livestock producers and dairy farmers. It's going to be an even tighter year ahead for feed. And so this just continues to ripple out, affecting all the commodities. And then out in California, same thing there. You have zero water allocations from the state. And that means more and more water being diverted away from the row crops like rice or other specialty crops, and to keep those almond trees alive. And so you're going to have higher produce prices. This just keeps going on and on and on. In addition to all the other issues we're seeing with food inflation caused by what's going on with short crops around the world, like South America. And now you add in the Black Sea, and it's just now transportation costs to get food to the consumer. As we all know, agriculture is a very transportation-heavy industry. To get food from the field to a consumer's dinner plate, that's a lot of miles in between. And so, as fuel prices remain elevated, and with the trucker shortage we're still dealing with, it's hard to see a situation there where food prices would be going down even with rising interest rate policy.
Right.
So again, maybe the Fed can influence other things like housing prices or the stock market, or the prices of dishwashers and microwaves and things like that. But given all of these other factors that are outside of the Fed's realm of influence, it's hard to see a situation where we're going to see material decline in food prices.
Right. Okay. So now spend a little time talking about your specialty here, specialty crops, what that looks like, fresh fruits and vegetables, those kind of things. You start looking at, like the nut farms and stuff like that out in California. You start looking at produce, high value crops, those kind of things that are very, very much grown in the southwest part of the United States and the western, seaboard and those kind of things. But for the most part, you start talking about drought, you start talking about higher cost of food, and you start looking at how does that affect the fresh produce market when you start looking at the higher price of food as those prices of food start going up.
Well, as you can imagine, the prices are up across the board. Some crops are record high, like processing tomatoes is record high. You have like the rice that's grown out in California, the medium grain sticky rice. That is at multi-year highs, highest in 13 years, and it's going to go higher now that acreage is expected to drop even more to record low as farmers send that water down the river or down someplace else to another user. And so, across the board, it's going to be reduced acreage, reduced yields, and it's going to be higher prices. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean growers are going to be not making money. Many of them will by selling water or collecting indemnity payments for crop insurance. So it's not necessarily an entirely dire situation for growers. For a lot of growers, they'll still have an income, except this carries on into following years as well with the ongoing drought. What happens to these fallowed acres? Do they stay fallowed? There's cost wrapped up in those fields the longer you fallow them. And I grew up in Western Kansas where you fallow every other year in a wheat fallow rotation. Like you're accumulating cost every year. You're not farming or not growing a crop. So there is cost embedded in those fallowed fields. It's not like you just walk away and forget about them. So there is that situation. But I'd say the main concern here is what's going to happen to your main crops, like tree nuts. We have a lot of trees still coming into production that are non-bearing acres. Well, what's going to happen here when we're in another short water year? Do we keep watering some of these older trees, or do we start pulling them? Especially, this is another complicating odd story in this price inflation environment. The price of almonds has not gone up a lot. In fact, that's been a real head scratcher because we had a couple of freezes back in February during the bloom, and almond prices really didn't budge. And some are wondering, well, this is really odd to see this happen when you've got this weather event that has perhaps knocked 10% of the crop off on yield. And what's happening is that we've got stocks building up in the United States because of the logistics issues. It's finally catching up to us here.
Yeah.
Or we can't export these tree nuts, or we can. It's just getting very delayed, and shipments are being canceled. And so that's creating a buildup of supply in the United States, and that's depressing prices. So that is on the periphery here, outside of the realm of weather and what have you. That's holding down tree nut prices. But at the end of the day, still though, you have to deliver that product to the consumer, and the cost of doing that's going up. Trucking and warehousing and fuel, as you know, those remain tight. And so those costs are elevated, and so that doesn't necessarily means that the consumer is seeing lower prices in this inflationary environment. In fact, shipments are down in the U.S. for tree nuts because of logistics, and those costs are elevated, and consumers may be pushing back on those costs. We don't see any prices being lowered at the consumer level.
Yep. All right. So. Excuse me. So last thought here as we go into wrapping this up, as you take a look at the remainder of this year going into 23, like when do you see, I guess the question I want to ask you here is, looking at the equipment marketplace, sooner or later factories are going to be at full bore production again. Everyone's going to be getting their stuff. There won't be a bunch of delays getting one little part that's kind of thrown off the whole chain here. But when that does happen, then you're going to see the premium for available equipment being removed, and we'll have just more of a quote unquote normal marketplace. When do you think that would be something that you're going to pay attention to for the commodity side of the market?
We're talking about machinery here?
No, we're talking about commodities. Like, when do you think that commodity premium is going to be kind of relieved, I guess, and go back to more quote unquote normal pricing?
I'd say costs are going to catch up first.
Okay.
And when there's profit, cost is or inputs are bid up, whether that is fertilizer, crop protectant, land rent, or land prices. Those costs are going to chase the profit and erode that down. In a perfectly competitive environment, erode those profits to zero. Okay, so you'll be in a situation where you have an elevated cost environment, and then a market correction at some point on price. And when that happens, I don't know. Timing is always the issue there.
Right.
It's one thing to posit a theory here. Then when somebody says, okay, that's all great, when does it happen? Well, next Tuesday at 1 o'clock.
Right.
How specific you want to get?
If you ask specific, let me know, and just keep it between us. We won't
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
If I did, as
Yeah.
you know, as the adage goes, I'd own my own island with my own yacht.
Right.
But we can come up with some theories here that costs are going to be elevated on the production side going through the remainder of this year. You can see that in land values. You can see that in cash rents. I'd say the on your end there, Casey, with machinery, there might be some positive. Once some of the new machines, new equipment start entering the market, that's going to depress used machinery probably in the next 18 to 24 months.
Yep.
I heard John Deere's got about 15 months of backlog. They've got the orders, but 15 months yet to go to fill it. That was their statement. So just go with that, 15 months. That's going to put you through next year, to the back half of next year.
Right.
And okay, we'll just call it there. We'll say 2024, perhaps, based on that one market indicator where you might see machinery costs start to come down, perhaps. And if those costs come down, there might be some other costs that are coming down. And we don't know where the Ukraine-Russia situation will be and what impact that will be on fertilizer prices, or how much production we can ramp up here in the United States and Canada. I would assume that over the next 18 to 24 months, we're going to have a lot of these costs down, because we've moved more product through the supply chain. We've brought more capacity online. I've heard anecdotally from other customers of ours that their efforts to automate have been delayed because of lack of equipment, and the timeline they give is 18 to 24 months.
Yep.
So we'll just call it 24 months to be on the conservative side. We'll start to see prices drop on key infrastructure. And then we're going to start to see productivity increase. We're going to start to see product move through the system. And conceivably, therefore, with supply catching up to prices, then prices would soften. So I'm just, in the big theory here, in the big grand scheme of things, of all things commodity and agriculture, we'll call it 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. And that's what on the machinery side of it, that's kind of my thought, is the tail end of 23 going into 24, maybe first quarter of 24, seeing some relief. But again, it all comes back to, like, by now I thought we'd have more supply chain issues kind of figured out, but
yeah,
I'll tell you, some days it feels like it's worse than it was a year ago. So it's just, it's a never ending cycle. It just feels like when you feel like things are kind of coming together, then all of a sudden something crazy happens.
There's some positive news. The ship lineup outside of Los Angeles is shorter.
Yeah.
20 some ships now, I believe, is what I had heard.
Yeah.
Now from the peak early in January, I think it's like over 100. So there's, we have more people entering the job market again. That's a positive. But, I think it's more of a slow thaw rather than, the problem being fixed in one fell swoop. It happens over time.
Right.
So I think we just have to be patient and, wait for more people to come back to the job market, wait for more people to find out, that they do want to be a truck driver, for instance.
Yeah.
Or that they I don't know. I mean, those kind of jobs are so hard to fill because it's such a hard job to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just going to take a longer time. Immigration is down. And so legal immigration is down. And so, which means it's going to be, we have some immigrants at the border, but trying to place those people legally into some of these jobs isn't going to do anything. So again, the manpower just isn't there. It's not going to be fixed in the short term. So it's going to be, you got to keep the long view.
Absolutely. Hey, well, good stuff as usual, Tanner. I really enjoy when you come on and have these conversations. So if folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what you're doing at CoBank, what's the best way to do that?
Well, they can reach any one of us on our staff at Knowledge Exchange at CoBank at our website at cobank.com.
Right on. I am Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you find the latest editions of the Moving Iron Podcast. Also, go to LinkedIn. I have a page there that's set up for the Moving Iron Podcast, as well as a YouTube channel called Moving Iron Podcast. So check those out. Go to Moving Iron LLC for everything Moving Iron related, blog posts, the entire library of the Moving Iron podcast, as well as information for the Moving Iron Summit coming up in Nashville, Tennessee, 6, 7, and 8 downtown there at the Hilton. So Tanner and some of his cohorts are going to be there and like talking about this kind of stuff and kind of doing a roundtable type deal. So looking forward to that. So Tanner, appreciate you being on the podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Good to see you.
You too, man. For Tanner Ehmke, I'm Casey Seymour. Let's go be smart, folks. Out.
Axon Tire is going to have more tips, tricks, and client advice throughout the year and in September at the Moving Iron Summit in Nashville. If you're looking to sign up for the event, please head over to MovingIronLLC.com. We hope to see you there. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 or go to valleytransitinc.com for all of your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. And no matter how you buy ag equipment from a dealer, auction, or a private party, AgDirect can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.